Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, friends from all across the land. We are here again at another session. Welcome back to the Responsive Nonprofit Summit. As I just left the main stage, so I'm going to be drinking a lot of water and asking a lot of great questions to my friends here. As you know, this session we're going to be talking a little bit about is the responsive approach to navigating local and national fundraising models. If you were in my last session, you heard that I used to work at the Boy Scouts of America and a couple other different national and federated models. I have a group of my friends here to help talk through the dynamic between a local and a national organization. And what we're going to break down is how are nonprofit teams building those relationships with donors, our volunteers, our supporters to collaboratively and effectively connect those two situations together, the national and the local, to have that modern philanthropic environment. Our panel is going to deep dive into some dynamic discussions. One thing when we prepped and had this conversation, we do want to keep it lively. We do want to have it active in the chat, but this is not a complaint session. This is an opportunity for all of us to collaborate and come together to see how our national organizations and our local organizations can work together to grow generosity. And as you might have known, so we have, before you do, there's a chat, there's a session, this will be recorded. We're going to be sharing it after the fact and be able to get through there. So please engage yourselves on our chat. Please let us know where you guys are coming from, what organizations you represent, what do you want to get out of this? And if you have any questions for our panelists, we're going to be able to drive that. If you don't know, my name is Eric Tamales. I am our chief evangelist, our chief community officer here at Virtuous, one of our nonprofit industry experts. I have the great pleasure of visiting and being on the road and talking and learning and hearing what's going out there in our space and informing our internal teams, whether it's marketing or product, every different angle to be able to help grow generosity. We are big advocates for the work you guys do. We value you. We appreciate you, and we're here to help. And I can't wait to connect. But hey, team, I'd love to you guys come off camera for a second for your guys' introductions. I'd love to introduce everybody and have you guys share your aspirations, your background, where you guys are working with, and all the different organizations. And we'll just go left to right here with Liz. I think you're here, right?
I guess that's me. Hi, I'm with Easterseals of Southeastern Pennsylvania. Started as a special event coordinator and worked my way up to director of development. Just found deep passion for community, helping people with disabilities. And I love working with such a diverse group of leaders and executives, but that are taking that executive brain power and putting it to community change. And I just hope to continue to see it grow.
Love it, Liz. We value what you guys are doing at Easterseals for your community. And I love the fact that you also worked with the organization for a long time. So you've seen the good, the bad, the ugly, and ways to move forward.
It's been 19 years of excitement. Nothing's ever the same, but I think I'd be really bored if everything was the same every day.
Right. Totally agree with you on that. Hey, Brandon.
Hey, Eric.
I'm so excited that you're here. You come from, I can't wait for you to share your background. You come from two federated organizations, which I give you great credit for to manage that.
Oh, good afternoon and good morning, everyone. I'm Brandon Leong. I'm the Vice President of Development and Communications with the YMCA of Metropolitan Los Angeles. I've been with the Y a little over a year now. And I think what I love most about the work is just, it is a large historic organization, but we're also doing amazing things at the ground level, really hyper responsive to local community. And then prior to my role at the Y, I also worked for the Boy Scouts of America. And before the Boy Scouts, I worked at a couple of smaller local nonprofit organizations. So I've had the luxury of being able to experience working in the nonprofit sector for both small local organizations as well as larger federated organizations.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you for being here too, Brandon. We really appreciate it. In true technology situation, Susan is having an audio issue. I don't know if she's here yet. We are trying to get her back on board, but she comes from the national organization Goodwill Industries. So she would represent she's the chief development officer for Goodwill. She's going to be coming in here shortly, so she's going to be late, but she's on her way. So with that, Karen, I'd love for you to share your background.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. My name is Karen Englert. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Boys and Girls Clubs of St. Charles County. We are the county just west of St. Louis, for those not familiar with Missouri and it all fair. So I have a long history of work in the nonprofit sector, specifically in development. Development is really where my heart is. In my role, I spend a lot of time in that lane too. Prior to coming to Boys and Girls Club, I was with the American Heart Association. So again, a national nonprofit with local chapters. And then similar to Brandon, prior to that, I was with a very small local non-for-profit. It was 3 staff members. So kind of seen all the different size and scope, and just excited to have conversations about what we can do in partnership with national models to advance the work locally.
I think that is right. Couldn't say it better, Karen. I think that's the goal that all of us here want to be able to accomplish, is how do we work collaboratively with national to focus in on our local youth, right? Most of you guys are in youth-based organizations or, special needs, and it's be able to help support our customers and individuals. So thank you. I think I'm going to kick it off with, when we were dialoguing and having this conversation, we talked about that elephant in the room and what it is and how to manage it. And really, I think just having that conversation of just how do we build trust on both sides, right? I mean, be from the national viewing into the local and the local viewing into the national. What would you be? I mean, Karen, you're off mute first. I'm going to put you on the spot. How would you start with that trust factor there?
I mean, so to a point, and maybe this is just the world I live in, I think every relationship, right, you have to go in with a healthy amount of apprehension, and I think that's okay. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. The work that I do is primarily focused on the children that I see every single day come through our door. So that's where my focus has to be. But I would also be a fool not to take advantage of the opportunities, the resources, all of the things that are happening at the national level. So for me, like when I first started, a big part of it was just doing a lot of research, figuring out what were the national priorities, seeing where we lined up, and then also saying, okay, there is not an overlap here, so maybe I'm going to focus my efforts here.
That's fantastic. Focus on what their outcome is. Like, start with their why, right? Start with what they're interested in, where their priorities are. I would go deeper too. I would look at the people, like who drives it, right? Because people matter. And Liz, your background, I mean, you've been with the Easterseals for 20 years, so you know where everybody's personal passions are, right? And priorities.
You know the people, and you also, it's communication. You're not going to get anywhere without clearly communicating your own expectations and asking what their expectations are of you. And particularly at the national and the local level, there's often competing priorities. So establishing before things happen, this is what I need from you, this is what you need from me, and being considerate of other people's time. And it all boils down to communication. Trust. If you're not transparent and you can't articulate what you want and need, you're going to break trust simply because they didn't meet your expectations. Yeah,
I mean, trust matters. Right? What I'm hearing there is trust matters, right, on both ends, right? Like if you burn a bridge, that trust in that person is gone for how long, right? And it's hard to repair it.
Very hard to repair. And you also have to think about follow-up. So when they very often people avoid the conflict, you just have to embrace the conflict and say, okay, how do we work through to the other side? Because we both have the common goal of serving the communities that our mission supports. We just have different ways of doing it.
Brandon, you've had the experience with both the Y and the Boy Scouts. How would you communicate, the importance of, the difference between national versus local, right? And
Yeah, a good question. And sort of to piggyback off of the comments that Karen and Liz made, I think as part of that communication, it's having a dialogue with the national office on what are those strengths and what are those challenges that both that the national office is facing as well as at the local level. I had the joy of working for the Boy Scouts of America during a pretty large national PR crisis. And it was an opportunity to still be able to convey the strength of that national organization, but also to really hyper focus on what's happening at the local level. And I think what's really important through all of this is to really remain donor centric and figure out what's important to the donor, and what are those priorities that are relevant to the donor, and without bashing one side or the other, it's having that open dialogue with donors.
Yeah, I mean, that's really important on both ends, right? Like to be understanding the donor dialogue as well as the communication. Susan, can we hear you?
I can hear you.
Can you hear me? I can hear Susan. Hey, welcome, Susan.
I'm on my iPhone. So sorry about that, you guys. My apologies.
Oh, it's all right. We live in this technology world right now with Zoom and webinar. We're all used to this, right? Susan, we just went around the horn to talk a little about trust and between the national and the local. But before I ask you that same question, because you represent the national side of our team, can you give a little introduction to yourself and your background and who you are?
Sure. My name is Susan Mashabshab. I'm the Chief Development Officer at Goodwill Industries International. I work out of the Washington, D.C. area, and I work to find funding and support for not only the GII office, or the international office, but also for 154 affiliate organizations across the country. And I've been working in development work for over 25 years, and I'm just really excited to be here, and thank you for your patience with my technical issue.
Oh, that's great. We're glad you're here. It's fine with us. The question was that we were talking about was that trust, and I think you coming from the national side and the thing and team, I think like the thing that for our friends here, all four of our panelists overlap in some way, shape, or form, right? Like Goodwill and Easterseals are sister charities, as I would call you guys, as well as the challenge, right? Like Goodwill doesn't have a robust individual giving program, but the Y and the Boy Scouts are on the other side, right? So like that's where we all come together and be able to help support. But Susan, I'd love to kick it over to you about the trust. We were talking about trust and like what matters and like that big elephant in the room. Like how do you trust between the national and local?
So I worked at Easterseals as a local affiliate CDO, as well as then went to the national organization, and now in a similar situation where I'm at Goodwill in the national organization. I think that one of the things that is really, I always have to remind myself that because folks don't know me and they don't know the work that we're doing on the national level, nor do they maybe understand the goals that we're trying to achieve, may not understand why we act the way we do. And also, I think that, we see things, we forget sometimes, I think, to take into account all the things that are going on in the local chapter or affiliate or organization, because there's a lot of different levers that are being pulled, as well as, then here comes the national office to say, hey, we have this corporate partnership and we'd really love to have you have this special event, track all the people who come, give us a nice organized list and all of that stuff. And I think that when we've had successful, or when I've had a lot of trust with the people that I'm working with in the field, it comes from me going an extra mile from the national office to understand what's going to work prior to perhaps getting that national deal to go through. So I think that that's really part of how we've shifted the way that we're working now, is that, it's not us working on a national level, it's us working with our member organizations to find out how we can complement the work that they're doing, but also have the needs of our corporate partner as well as, or our foundation, as well as the needs of the national headquarters. So I think that's about a lot of conversation and a lot of negotiation prior to having that agreement signed, and having everybody all in, if you can do that.
I love that, Susan. I think, and you coupled into a couple of different things that we've already shared, right? Like we were talking going upward, right? Like looking at the national, what their imperatives are and their goals. And you went the other way of saying, hey, we should listen to what's on the boots on the ground and what's important to our local teams, which is like the first step in the responsive fundraising, right? Like to listen, right? We want to start with that why. So I love that. Brandon, Liz, Karen, you want to follow up on any of that with Susan, or she nailed it? What do you think? She nailed it. Well, what power? So, like, one of the questions I wanted to ask you guys is like, what kind of authority do each side have, the local versus national, right? Like who is in control in that situation? I mean, it's another elephant of a question, but you know, I've opened up to the panel, like what you guys think here.
I think it yo-yos a bit. It depends on what you're talking about. We're in a situation where if they want to come into our market and do a certain activity, they need me on board. So I need to understand what the reasons for the activity, how they're going to share data, what they're going to do. Meanwhile, if I want to launch something that spans a regional or a bigger geographic footprint, I need to not only bring in my colleagues, but I need to bring in our national office. So I think it depends on what the activity is and what the intent of the activity is. But one thing we've learned at Easterseals is if we can work together and find those common denominators, branding is stronger, messaging is stronger, and opportunities are stronger.
I love that. That makes so much sense. Susan?
I mean, I agree with Liz. I think that, you know, the power is in the brand, and everybody knows goodwill. They may not know what goodwill does as far as putting people to work and helping them with life skills and other things, but they all see the brand and think they understand the brand, and that they see us all as one. So they don't see us as the goodwill of greater Washington, D.C. or the goodwill of Chicago. And, you know, they see us as one goodwill. And so I think that that has to be where we come together and say, okay, if we're going to do this, how can we do it in the best that honors our donors? And then also that makes sure that we're all whole at the end of it, right? I never want to see our members not have a joyful experience, just as I wouldn't want my donor to have a non-joyful experience in work. So that's what we strive for. Not always do we, sometimes we come short, right? To be honest, but I think that's the goal for all of us as we work together.
Totally. And I love, and Susan, I love that you're coming from that point of view too, because I mean, I'll say it, and I'll protect Liz, Brandon, and Karen. I don't know, you guys don't believe this. I know you don't. But like being in that space and serving in the organization I was, I didn't always trust that heart was there at the national coming down. And that's why we wanted to have this panel of this discussion, because it actually is there. And they do believe in the cause, and they do want to help our local community. And I think, you know, both you guys encapsulated that perfectly.
I think it's such a good reminder to be conscious of the difference between the local autonomy. You know, we are a separate 501c3 that can technically operate autonomously to a certain degree, but then it's also protecting that larger brand that, you know, that Susan, you said it really well. So it is that constant reminder, and I definitely know as a local organization in the past have definitely felt that, you know, I could just do it separately. I could do it differently the way I want to do it, but really having to remind myself that I am part of this larger brand, and we have an obligation to protect that larger brand of the organization
and utilize it, right? Like the brand is so powerful, like Goodwill and the Boy Scouts and the Boys and Girls Club, like they're so big. Let's capitalize it here locally.
Yeah, I think just to piggyback on so much of that, I mean, I love a lot of the comments about, right, we do need to be sensitive to the fact that we are our own 501c3s. We can operate independently. However, we're part of a federated model. And so when we think about the mission, in our case, of all the Boys and Girls Clubs, it should be the same. So that means our development should fall in line with that, right? Our branding should fall in line with that, our marketing, all of those pieces. I try to really look at national, the development office at national as, you know, they're their own separate entity. They have their own objectives. They have their own goals, right? We're going to have some overlap in some of those goals. And so again, doing that research to figure out how can I maximize those resources? And then where can I just be willing to kind of stand firm to say, no, we're going to own this one, right? This one is ours. That is theirs. Again, it goes back to the communication piece of it and just having those conversations. I think having worked for local nonprofits that are part of a bigger one, like we're all going to end up with directives sometimes, right? And Susan, you talked about it, right? We're like, oh, we need you to host this event and do all these things, right? And that's part of the job. It is. It's part of the job, right? And so for me, it's finding that balance of how much do I need to say yes to knowing that, yes, that supports the bigger organization, but I can then build those relationships, right? Like if I do my follow-up correctly, I can capitalize that on future gains. And so it's, I don't know if it's the best way to say it, but sometimes I just try to figure out, like, ultimately what's in it for us, and operate from that model.
I would really expect, as a national person and also as a person who worked locally, I remember when I worked at Easterseals, I felt like part of my job was to manage up, right? To make sure that if I wanted to make sure that I was always going to be invited to the table if I could be, so that I was part of that decision-making process and would be maybe have first dibs to things that I might not have been able to have, right? So I completely agree with you, Karen. I think that it's one of those things, and I think, we should all be watching out for who we work for, and that's important. And so one of the things, though, I would really like to try to figure out, and I don't know if you guys have maybe figured it out, but how do we come together for those really big, comprehensive asks with those very large philanthropists, knowing that regionally we may be stronger, or nationally we may be stronger together, and what your thoughts are on that? Sorry, I didn't mean to ask a question.
No, I love that question. I think to be able to answer it, let's take a step back for 1 second, and because all four of you have different models of fundraising and how you do it. You're all 501c3s, you're all separate, and you work down and work sideways and work, like some of you guys, I think we were talking about this back a while back, was like, Easterseals, Liz, I mean, nationally does all your direct response, right? And so how do you work locally on that? And I think maybe that's how we unpack that first, and then answer the question of how can we work collaboration together, because we'll have separate goals.
Yeah, so our national office they have all of our direct mail, a lot of our email campaigns, and it is pretty robust. And the way we execute locally is we view it, they're not really prospecting and stewarding those donors. It's the ask. It's constantly going out via mail. So I see them as my donors to prospect and bring in locally. Also, our national office doesn't have boots on the ground providing services in communities. So it's my job to recognize those donors and invite them where I can. I can say we've partnered with our national office to do very specific asks via direct mail for a one and done, a special campaign. So I think it's about finding your avenues to leverage what the national office is already doing. And also knowing when they have more of ability to get out there. Corporate partnerships. It's not necessarily something that my affiliate's very strong in. So we've recently not just partnered with the national office, but with other Easterseals affiliates. So talking to each other, that is one of, in my opinion, the greatest assets of an affiliated model like this, is a built-in group of colleagues that are all working for a similar mission that have the opportunity to talk to each other frequently. So when it comes to the national office, they fundraise in my backyard. I'm not always very happy about it, but that's also filling my pipeline. That's filling my pipeline with major gift prospects. That's filling my pipeline with potentially corporate partnership prospects. And it's my job to put in the time on my end or build it into my team's time to leverage it.
Collaboration, right there, works together with national. They're not the enemy. We're not the enemy. Like, we are working in conjunction. It's going to help, right? If we just lean forward on that. Brandon, what do you think? How does the YMCA fundraise?
Well, I think part of what we have to keep in mind too is, what is the intent of the donor? Like, the donor may want to keep their dollars local because they have that close personal affinity to their local branch, their local center. And so I think it's an opportunity for collaboration between the national and the local office to really have a conversation with the development officer and figure out, as you've been cultivating this relationship with the donor, what are his or her priorities? Is it even appropriate to approach them on a larger scale? But I think that it still comes down to that trust factor between the national and local office, and that opportunity for collaboration. But I think we just have to definitely keep the donor's intent in mind throughout the entire process.
Well, and I think the other side too. I mean, Susan, I don't know how you guys do it, but it's the attribution. Where does the revenue go? right? Does it stay, to Liz and Brandon's point, does it stay locally or does it go to the national opportunity? Is there a proportion? I mean, I don't know the answer. I don't know what's appropriate. But like, you know, we all work together. We want to collaborate because if there's a bigger budget, it's going to help drive new response and pipeline, like Liz is mentioning. So there's like a giant circle here.
There is. And, you know, I think that the circularity of this is part of that power, right? So if, a lot of ways that what works here is that we'll get a grant from a large corporate foundation. We will then do an RFP to our membership, and our members will answer the RFP. And, you know, depending on how much money we have, we will give them each a sub grant. So they become a sub grantee. They are given this money outright, and then we ask them to report back. So in many ways, we act as an intermediary in some ways, but are able to get a larger chunk of, or larger gift in hopes that we'll be able then to be the in between for the foundation, and they won't have, you know, 30 calls. They'll have one call to make. So that is one way that we've worked it. And you know, we don't really keep that much here because the donor wants it to go into the field. So that's the way that works for us. I don't know how it works for others on the call, but that's the way it works for us.
What do you think, Karen?
There's definitely a similar model in place.
Is that my internet or is that Karen's?
With us, so and we do it.
You're back.
I think it was mine.
You just answer that again.
I'm back.
You're back.
I'm so sorry, guys. I don't know. Yes. Okay. So I think it depends on some of the preferences. We have what we call pass-through funding, right? Where BGCA, Boys and Girls Clubs of America, acts as the middleman, basically, right? Because that is a funder preference. It also, when we're talking about gifts of millions and millions of dollars, you know, like we need a go-between. So those are all pass-through dollars that, and to Susan's point, right, we have kind of our point of contact for reporting, and it's easy. We also, though, have some of these larger national partnerships where like the national office might give us the data, meaning like, here's who you need to reach out to. And then they just are hands off at that point, right? It's ours to own. So we can do as much or as little, depending on how much we want to engage. So I think it kind of just depends on the type of gift, obviously the size of the gift, and as it all goes back to, right, what is most important to the funder. You know, Brandon talked about this, and I can't agree with it more about just respecting those donor wishes. You know, for our organization, we're serving third and fourth generation families right now. And so when they think they're making a gift to us and it's going somewhere else, they get upset, right? And so it is just trying to be mindful of, you know, knowing your donors, knowing kind of that, the details of that relationship, if you will. And again, because we have the ability to get to know our people so well, like we can figure out a lot of times, like, hey, we just want to check in. If you want us to go to national, perfect. Like we will push that for you. But did you mean it to come to us? And so it's being able to have those conversations so that everybody's wishes are respected.
And it cuts both ways too. If we get a gift in and we think, gee, this doesn't look like it belongs here, we do the same thing. We call the member and say, I think this belongs to you. Can you tell if it's there in their database, right? And so we do work it both ways. And, you know, there are times where it doesn't work in the favor of one or the other. And I'm sure that there's sorry feelings on one side, but usually that's not too often.
Well, I mean, you own up to it. I mean,
Susan,
like, you know, you get out there and you say, this was a mistake and I'm sorry, right? And it goes back to the earlier part that we started off with, which is all about trust, right? And so, sorry, I interrupted you, Karen.
It's all right. I was just going to say, Susan, I mean, it's wonderful that Goodwill does that. I can say that just, you know, kind of looking back historically, frame of reference, I don't think that's always the case. And so I think that is working, again, from an earned trust model, and kudos to you for doing that. I wish I could say that always happens. It doesn't, but I think it's a good goal for us to aspire to.
I have to echo Susan and Karen. I think Easterseals on a national level, we've gotten better at that. Is recognizing some donor intent and being able to explain to donors where things are going, how a gift to the national supports the entire network and our brand as a whole, but also a change in leadership at national, understanding that when my local donor makes it onto the wrong website or sends a check-in because they got a mail piece from me and a mail piece from them at the same time, we need to get that gift back to the local level where it was intended. And it started with communication of this is a problem and we're going to start pushing back. And then the national office saying, well, we need to sustain and we need to grow. So where's the middle happen?
So true. I love that. I love all of that conversation. Now, going back to Susan's original question, right? How do we, now that we kind of got a baseline for all of us, like, how are we working together to push that gift together in the attribution and collaboration? Like, what does tactically that look like?
I know at Easterseals that has actually started at the Development Leadership Network. So our development leadership is development directors from across the country. We've come together and formed our own affinity group, and we have conferences, monthly meetings. We started that conversation years ago as to who does similar services, what are our prospects, who are we all. We pulled a huge database together of who is getting gifts all from the same companies. And then now we are opening that door for our national office to join the conversation so that we can pull it all together. But it started initially with the trust built amongst colleagues. And then as we built that trust with the national office, now we're looping them in and working in a more effective way.
And Liz, I love that because I've participated as an outsider a couple times with this group. And I think it's one of the better, and I know all of you guys do something similar, is the fact that we are, let's put Easterseals on for a second, is we're all separate 501c3s. There's, I don't know how many, 75 affiliates around the United States, right? Somewhere around there. And we have a national, but we all have different constituents, different donors, different boards, different everything, but we have the same problems. Right? And we're all collaborating in our own individual markets at this DLN. And I think that's what's really sharp. And then you built the trust here locally. And then you said, okay, I'm going to invite national to come and present and get involved. And now they're having that opportunity there. And Brandon, Karen, I know you guys do something very similar to that too, right?
Yeah, with the Y, I've had the luxury of, there is a kind of formalized system or fraternity of those peers that are in the fundraising space. But I would suggest to folks, if you're not in an organization that already has that built-in thing, it's just start looking at other folks that are your peers at other associations or other affiliates, because I think those are your best points of contact. And that was something, even when I was at the Boy Scouts, I reached out to several other development directors and chief development officers, just because we were all going through the exact same thing, and being able to create that network, even informally, was a tremendous resource.
Eric, I think if I can add one thing, I mean, we talked about how do we, effectively collaborate, right? And so we're talking about a lot of money. We're talking about a lot of legal language. And so I think just clarity, right? On paper, in stone, we know what we're getting. We know what you're getting. We know what the donor wants. And just, again, having just that, I operate from a clear as kind mindset, right? So if we just have those discussions before we even get into it, then there's no surprises, because ultimately that's always what tips it. It takes something good to something bad, and it can be like the littlest thing, but it's that surprise and it can throw it all off. So having it documented is just so important.
That is so true. The surprises are always what get you, because you're always like, never would have thought ever that would have happened, right? Or they would have thought that would, or whatever it is. And I do think you're right. I also love I love the fact that there, we also have an affinity group of fundraisers, but we don't have that many fundraisers across our system yet. And so it's very interesting that we have a very small group of people who come together maybe once or twice a year to have those kinds of conversations, and then different calls during the year as well. But I do love the camaraderie of these organizations when you can get it. It's great.
Well, and I love not only the camaraderie amongst our own individual teams. Selfishly, I love the fact that y'all are here at the RNS. I love the fact that fundraisers are taking time away from our work to sharpen the saw, learn from our peers, and learning from everyone else in our community. So the folks that are here listening and watching, please ask your questions to our team here, because we want to get you guys engaged as well in what we can learn from you. As well. I think that's one of my favorite things about fundraisers. We're all sister charities and we're all working in collaboration. So, what other, I'm going to look through some of our questions. So donor centeredness is what I wrote down is one of the key things. We wanted to talk a little bit about the importance of, well, let's go with the other side. It's the importance of giving both nationally and locally. We've broached a little bit of the conversation, but have we deepened it, right? I think Karen, you mentioned about going in and being if someone's interested in giving to the national over the local, we would honor that, right? But how effective is that? How much do we do there? Anyone jump in there?
I can just speak for us. I mean, we don't have as many issues with that because again, we're in the community. We've been in the community 70 years. So, most people know who we are. They know what we do. Over the years, we've opened additional sites in other parts of the area. And so then there's kind of that time to, again, let people know who you are and what you're doing. Number one, right? You got to earn some trust of that community. And then being able to have those conversations. I think every state or every organization is just totally different in terms of kind of how your donors want to give. And I think part of it is, in my experience, right, our larger donors want to give to a larger organization, right? When they look at the marketing benefits they get, right, from this well-advertised partnership, it's not my club, it's the national office. Right. And that's okay. That's okay. So again, it's just that donor intent. And, we all love gifts. Gifts are wonderful, but we also know that donors have expectations of those gifts. And so how are we fulfilling those expectations in a way that is best for everyone?
There is an interesting push-pull. I know when I've taken our direct mail marketing and I've put a lot of stewardship hours into somebody that I thought was going to be a major gift prospect, and then they increase their gift through direct mail marketing, but that money's not coming to me, but I see the movement and I still view them as a prospect. Where it gets a little bit trickier is sometimes on the corporate side of things when the affiliates are the ones that have to actually deliver. And it's a big lift for us. And there's a couple local companies that I actually can't quite engage with because of our other national partnerships. So it makes it a little bit awkward dancing around it. But in the end, I do think our brand is getting more. And our brand is a national office. If I have to rebrand locally, that's a huge lift on me. That's a huge explanation to donors. So strengthening the overall national, international brand is going to benefit me. Doesn't frustrate me any less when I sometimes hit a roadblock, but it is ultimately benefiting me. So I think you can be frustrated. It's never going to be perfect.
Well, and I think you hit the nail on the head, is the idea. I mean, God, it's hard to chew, right? We are as leaders and focusing on our local nonprofit. We want to raise money. We want to do program and everything else, but there is a big brand and it's a big opportunity for the entire movement, right? And that's a big pill to swallow. And I commend you on thinking that way, because I think we're all in it for the long run, right? So we got 4 minutes left, and I kind of want to go around the horn of what key thought or idea or takeaway would you like our nonprofit leaders to take from this conversation as part of their growth and fundraising maturity? Brandon, I'm going to put you on the spot first.
Sure. I think the key thought, it just boils down to communication and really just having that open dialogue with everyone involved, national level, the local level, and with donors. And I think secondarily to that, it's it is leveraging that national brand, and even if it can be frustrating, it is, we have this opportunity to work for this larger brand that's having tremendous impact on people throughout the country, and I think we shouldn't lose sight of that.
Karen, what do you think? What do you want to have from non-profiteers, as I like to call them, take away from here?
I mean, I absolutely agree with everything Brandon just said. But I will also say, like, every local organization needs to figure out how to maximize, right? And so, take the best that you can get from the national partnership, right? And work within that. There's a lot of people doing incredible work at the national office. So how can we use that to supplement what we're doing? How can we run in parallel, not in competition, and see the benefits there, right? I mean, the amount of time and resources it would take me as an organization to rebrand, to do all those things, it's a loss, absolutely. And so while it's hard because sometimes you don't see those hard dollars, like, they don't come through as a check, right? But when you look at your payroll, when you look at all those things, you see the return on having a national partner. So again, maximizing what you can out of it and not taking it personal is a really, really big part of it, right? I mean, you can't do that. You burn out, and that won't work.
Nope. We don't want fundraisers to burn out. We want them to stay in their role and help their local community and national organization. Liz, what do you think? What do you want folks to take away?
I echo what Karen and Brandon said, and then I would just say, leverage it for your local priorities. Find ways to make it work for you that also works for national. If you have a special campaign coming up, see if you can contact all the national donors that are in a certain geographic area. Leverage the fact that you are an affiliated or a federated network with a lot of minds doing the same things, and turn those lemons into lemonade wherever you can. Accept the prospect donor pipeline, get them in, and when you have a frustration, clearly communicate and then move on. If you hold on to it, it's going to be a problem. So
true. So true. It's a good relationship reminder too, to be able to, have those open dialogue, open communication, and being able to work together. Susan, can you round us out?
Sure. I think I agree with everything everybody said. I would say, if you're going to manage up and sideways and always, if I call and say, hey, I want to come to your event and I want to bring some corporate partners, it doesn't mean I'm coming to poach anybody from you. It actually means that I'm trying to show you off to these corporate partners and hope that you're going to get board members and other people through me to give you money and be a part of the world locally. So I only have your assets to be able to leverage, right? You are the reason why I exist as a national office person. And so I want to make sure that I'm showing you off to those who we're going to try to leverage to support you. So, I think we should all have real joy in the work we do together, and we should have fun, both as the national office and the local affiliate and chapters. So,
heck yeah, Susan.
That's my goal anyway, to have a good time.
We should. We're doing good work out there, providing solving a solution for our community and our customers and our clients and our donors. And yes, let's have some fun. Looking over to my executive producer, Will Schiffelbein. Do we have any questions?
We've got most of them.
We covered all our questions. Guys, this Responsive Nonprofit Summit is not just a one-person show. There is a huge team in the background. And so we are grateful for everyone being here. We are grateful for our panelists for dedicating and donating their time and resources. They will all be available. Connect with them on LinkedIn and communicate. They're here to help. Thank you for everybody. We're going to have a 15-minute break. Please go visit our sponsor hubs. There's a whole host of different situations. The reason why this thing is free for nonprofits is because our sponsors, and it's the whole plethora of them. We're going to be talking about them nonstop to be able to provide this out there to you guys. So with that, we got a 15-minute break. Go get a restroom, go get some water, go recharge a battery, and we'll see you here in 15 minutes. Thanks, team.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.